A while ago, I took a look at the Nintendo DSi. This time around, I'm taking a look at its competitor, the PSP, in 2023. The PSP, just like the DSi, can be purchased for around $20, and that's a great purchase for the native games alone. Not only do you have games that can compete with their console counterparts like LittleBigPlanet or Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, but you also have unique experiences like Echochrome, Lumines, and LocoRoco. I will put a list of PSP games I have in the description. If you feel like there's one game that I need to know about, please let me know. And of course, this time around, I'm also using custom firmware. On the PSP, it's extremely easy. You just need to get Pro C, start it up, then when it says, hey, press X to install, you press X to install, like so, and you're done. Now your PSP is running a non-permanent version of custom firmware, and I don't think permanent custom firmware is needed, because it's just this easy. Now with custom firmware, the PSP isn't a one-trick pony anymore. To start off, we have emulation. Game Boy games work for the most part, but something with the emulation is a bit wrong when it comes to RNG. Now, I don't know how widespread it is, but here in Tetris, it is really obvious. You can see that the generation is just wrong. There are too many empty lines here when you play the B mode. But despite that, I think most of the games are playable, and this is probably a 1 in a million occurrence. Next up is the Game Boy Advance, and it always seems on my channel that this is the tipping point where emulation fails or succeeds. So first up, I tested Voyland 4, and it runs great and has no problems. Until I activate the bomb. Just like with a previous handheld I tested, the frame rate drops to a really noticeable level, rendering it unplayable for me. Perhaps this was a fluke, and the PSP turns out to be a GBA beast. So let's check out Doom 2. And it doesn't run well at all. Just like with most handhelds that can't run Voyland 4, it also can't run Doom 2. It's especially noticeable in larger rooms, where it has to render more, or it's just more CPU intensive. The frame rate really drops, and the game feels really weird as well. But a decade or so ago, I played through Castlevania Aria of Sorrow without any noticeable slowdowns. So I reckon a good chunk of the GBA library should work, as long as they are not the most intensive games on the platform. Another emulator I played a lot was the SNES. At the time I played a lot of Super Mario World hacks, and can say from that experience that the SNES runs pretty good as well. Here I'm testing Umihara Kawase for the SNES, and this is a game I have a lot of experience with, and I can say it runs pretty good. Now it has a bit of slowdown, like very slightly, but I don't think it's too noticeable. And it's perfectly playable. So from my past experience and from my current experience, I can say the SNES is a wonderful platform you can play on the PSP. The next emulator is one I mentioned in the last video, Scum VM. Scum VM is quite slow when it comes to starting and adding a game, but once you're in-game, it works great. I tested by playing Monkey Island, and all I can say is I almost wanted to sit down and play through the entire game. Now it does seem that the screen transition is ever so slightly stuttering, but it really isn't a game changer. And I almost wanted to sit down and play through the entire game. But I didn't, otherwise this video wouldn't have come out for another 2 months. Next up is the PS1. Sony actually supported this, thanks to the PSP's CPU being very close to the PS1 CPU, allowing a sort of backwards compatibility emulation hybrid. Also with a tool, you can make your own PS1 games for PSP quite easily. Here I'm trying a game I'm quite familiar with, once again, which is Umihara Kawase Shun. Just like before, I really don't notice the game running any worse than on any other platform I played the game on. And that pretty much means it runs flawlessly. Now it might have some problems here and there, but the PSP is a beast when it comes to PS1 games. It is absolutely astonishing that handhelds that came out decades later still struggle. with PS1 games. And when I was younger, I played almost through the entirety of Final Fantasy VII and through about the beginning part of Final Fantasy VIII without any problems. So load this console up with a bunch of JRPGs and you have hours upon hours upon hours that you can play with this handheld. The PSP has also quite a bit of homebrew, but it becomes harder and harder to find the stuff. The community, however, isn't dead. I can highly recommend checking out the PSP Homebrew Developer Conference here on YouTube, and it gives me that glimmer of hope that we might get a little resurgent in PSP development. Gaming is, however, not all that the PSP can do. You can look at pictures, you can listen to music, and you can even watch videos. As a kid, I once put a few South Park episodes on my PSP and watched them endlessly over and over and over again. Right now, I have the entire movie Your Name on my PSP and the entire show Angel Beats. Sure, the quality isn't the best, but it's absolutely watchable. The only thing that bothers me ever so slightly is the volume, which is a bit low. Now, all of this is possible with the original memory sticks, but they are quite small, so I can highly recommend you to get one of these micro SD to memory stick Pro Duo adapters. Don't get the white ones, only get the black ones. I've noticed that the white ones, which can take 2 micro SD cards, are quite flimsy and like to fall apart very quickly. This one I had for like over a year now, or over 2 years even, and it works perfectly. And this brings me to the conclusion. The PSP is a fantastic and for me absolutely nostalgic console to such a degree that I would want to call in sick, load up my PSP with content, and spend a week at my mom's place with only the PSP in my hand. Perhaps this nostalgia makes me biased, but I really don't care. The PSP, especially for $20, trumps all the other retro handhelds. It's just this good of a console. So my opinion of if you should buy one of these in 2023, absolutely. It's a great console, it's a cheap console, you have tons of games that are native, you have tons of games that you can emulate, in a bind you can watch movies on it, series, you can use it as an MP3 player if that's what you want, you can look at your family pictures. It's a fantastic device. Get one before they become expensive again.